So I listened to the speech tonight by the president. It was short. It was 18 minutes. Usually his speeches are an hour. This was a presentation. I think there's a lot of messaging in here that's important, and a lot of subtleties. But I know everybody was looking for talking points about Venezuela. The only thing you could possibly relate to Venezuela was the comments that he made regarding shutting the border down and dealing with all the drug traffickers that had brought drugs into the country. He brought that up once. He did not spend a lot of time extensively talking about foreign policy. He didn't spend any time really talking about Israel or Palestine or Iran or Russia. And especially didn't talk about the elephant in the room, which is the Navy surrounding the coast of Venezuela. What he did talk about, he didn't talk about the oil tanker getting seized. What he did talk about was the things that really got him elected in the first place. And I think there's a reason for this. He wanted to pivot away from the things that clearly somebody finally probably got into his head and said, hey, your ratings are in the toilet and you need to stop talking about Venezuela and start addressing the things that people care about, which is affordability. Another one of those things that he claimed was a hoax. Now, he talked a lot about the economy that he inherited. He talked about the border that he inherited. He talked about the fact that inflation was high and now it's not. He talked about wages going up. He talked about a refund, a dividend to the military because of all the tariff money. Tariff, his favorite word. He talked about the fact that the U.S. next year is going to have a booming economy. He talked about the $18 trillion in investments. Now, look, all these things he's talking about, there's a theme. The theme is workers, wages, laborers, everything he talked about. He mentioned, I closed the border. We're deporting people. We deport people, and the new jobs created are for Americans. Wages, workers, labor. Are you noticing a pattern, a theme? Now, I'm not going to use this comment to connect him to his love for Putin and Xi. I'm not going to say that he's a subtle communist. I do think that President Trump has great admiration for President Xi, and he has great admiration for how China operates. And I think he's well aware that China has adopted some of the best parts of its own history and the successful countries that it witnessed in order to create the economy that it has today. And I think President Trump is well aware of that, and he's aware that we need to copy some of that, even if he won't call it that. I've talked on this channel about the golden share. Golden share is a term that comes from China, their golden share. I talked about the fact that he did the military parade. I talked about the fact that he talked about infrastructure. Now, look, he is not executing. He is not executing on all of the same things. For example, in China, they did start with foreign companies coming in, building factories, working with the Chinese people, and then eventually Chinese companies becoming a huge part of what they export to the world. The United States has the companies that were going into China, yet it's foreign companies that are doing all this investment into the United States, minus a couple. So we're not exactly copying the path. We're not exactly reopening all the factories that have closed. We're not exactly refilling the empty coffers of the American economy from 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 50 years ago or 60 years ago. But what I noticed he made a concerted effort to do tonight was talk about wages, workers, labor. He showed a graph where he talked about the increase. Okay, so here he's talking about Biden price increases. Here he's talking about food price increases. Let me make this bigger for you guys. So just go back. So Biden price increases. He wants to make it very clear. Look at that. His price is coming down. Talking about food price increases versus Trump. Food price decreases. Now, to be fair, this is the majority of the COVID era. And anytime you have an explosion, right, a bubble, you're going to have a bubble bursting. So, of course, coming now, we're in 2025. The COVID era really drags into 2022. So now you're in 2025. You should see a dramatic reduction, right? So that's not surprising. I'm not saying that we didn't have inflation. I'm not saying the economy was good under Biden. It was not. But this is not, this is a correction that should happen, right? But nonetheless, these are the things that he talked about. And I'm not here to necessarily argue about every single thing. I'm here to just go over what I saw and the important themes that maybe other people aren't going to pick up on. Now, again, wages, workers, labor. He talked about the fact that he's bringing back clean coal. So he talked about wage increases for workers and how their take-home pay had gone up. This specific chart, actually. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Biden real wage losses and Trump real wage gains for typical worker. This is, again, wages, worker, labor. This is the theme tonight. No Venezuela, no drug boats, no Iran, no Israel, no Russia, no Russia. Nothing, none of that. He didn't even talk about the fact that he had seized an oil tanker today. He didn't talk about the fact that he paused a business deal with the United Kingdom. He didn't talk about any of that stuff. He didn't talk about the threats to the EU, the threats to Russia. He didn't talk about any of that stuff. He didn't talk about soybeans. He didn't talk about China. All he talked about was wages, workers, labor. So this one he was obviously very proud of, bringing back clean coal, of course, an industry that had been wrecked by President Biden, so he takes credit for the $3,336 increase. Now, again, you'd have to ask people in these industries if they're seeing this actually in real time. I could tell you in the industry I'm in, I'm not seeing anything. But yeah, nonetheless, this was a presentation. This was a presentation to the American worker, laborer. This was a presentation to try to make it clear that he's different from the Democrats and you should vote for the Republicans in the midterms. He's aware of his declining popularity. That's why he stayed away from the topics that make him most unpopular. And he focused on wages, workers, and labor. And he wanted to make it clear that in the coming months, going into the midterms, that you're going to see the effects of the big, beautiful bill passed by the Republicans. You're going to see the effects of Trump's policies. And he wants to make it clear that it's Republicans that are going to be able to finish the job. That's what this was. This was a pitch. This was a presentation. He brought out his charts. And to be fair to the president, this is closer to his arena than foreign policy. You know, when he wants to do peace deals, I think that's great. But you know, he doesn't come out of the war machine. He's not a military guy. You know, he was CEO of Trump International. And what I was hoping for, and you know, we'll say yet to be seen, is that the former CEO, you saw it a little tonight in terms of the way he presented himself, and this was not a Trumpism caricature evening. This was a CEO of Trump International presenting his case to the board of directors, which would be the people of America, as to why you should have confidence in him as CEO and why you should have confidence in his team, his CFO, his CIO, his managers, and that the board of directors should show faith in his team as he corrects this malfunctioning corporation called the United States of America. That is what this speech was all about. And to be fair to him, this is what he's better at. Now, functionally, I have my issues with capitalism. I have my issues with the system. I have my issues with some of the things he's talking about that he hasn't done. I have my issues with the $18 trillion of investments, where I want to see groundbreaking. I want to see how many jobs that's going to create. I want to see domestication of some goods and services so that American people can work. I want to see investment in infrastructure. I want some high-speed rail. I also want to see a crackdown in crime. I don't want to see troops around Venezuela. I want to see him figure out how to stop people from getting stabbed on the subway, getting burned alive on the subway, how people can go out safely to dinner without getting assaulted. I want to see that. I don't want to see school shootings. I want to see that addressed. And I want a deeper investigation beyond just the, take the gun away. No, we have to do more than just say ban the gun, because the criminals get guns one way or the other. So we need to figure out something beyond that. There's something wrong in this country. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. But in terms of what this speech was tonight, this was the CEO of Trump International pitching to the board of directors why you should have confidence in him and his management team. And frankly, this is what he is good at. This is what he's been doing for 50 years. Okay? This is what he's been doing for 50 years. And I know there are people out there who don't like him, and there's people out there who don't listen to any of this stuff, and that's fine. But if you're someone who's been in the, financial services, or you've been in the professional world, you've been in the business world, you kind of understand what this was, and you understand that this was him doing his thing. This was not the caricature Trump. This was not the orange tweet man. Okay, this was the president or the leader of a business, of a corporation, and the United States is a private corporation. Make no mistake about it. It's a private corporation. And I know I said the board of directors is the people. In some ways that's true, although the true board of directors would be the people that own the currency and own the West. But you've heard that enough on this channel if you've heard me talk at all. So, but he is the CEO, regardless of who the board of directors are. And his management team would be the Scott Bessents of the world. It would be the Marco Rubios of the world. It would be the RFKs. It would be the Howard Lutnicks of the world, especially on economics. It's going to be Lutnick and Bessent. So what you're hearing is the CEO of Trump International really make his pitch, and I think he did that in a way that people haven't heard over the last couple of weeks, because it's been all about foreign policy, and this Venezuela thing is such a train wreck that people, and I was in a chat in the CGTN news channel feed on YouTube, and just credit to them and their wonderful network and obviously beautiful country and everything. And one of the first things that was asked in the chat is, did he say anything about Venezuela? So the world wants to know what's happening with Venezuela. That's where the focus is. When the U.S. Navy moves, people want to know what's going to happen, what's going on. So he purposely stayed away from that and focused on domestic issues, because that's where his ratings are. That's where people want to see things. That's the questions that the American people, not the international, but the American people want to know. How are you going to help me pay my bills? Why are my electric bills so high? Why is my car insurance so high? Groceries are still high. They may be lower than under Biden, but they're still high. What is going on? And that's what he was addressing tonight. Whether this pitch to the board of directors by the chief executive officer of the malfunctioning corporation known as the United States, whether this pitch was an actual success or not, that's up to you. Do you feel better about the gasoline price? I mean, you should feel better about it now versus months ago. I'm not going to argue, but my car insurance has gone up, and that's sort of wiping out the gains from gasoline. So my car insurance has spiked 2 years in a row. And I know he said that, he's pushing through some changes to the healthcare system, this bill that went through that's going to make the health insurance companies mad. Well, what about the auto insurance companies? They are sucking us dry. They're killing us. And car insurance in China, I can tell you, is not a concern of the Chinese citizen. Those who have cars can easily afford car insurance. Now, Is new electricity generation, is that going to help the average American? It might. But here's the problem with that. Are any of those new electricity generation uh, centers, are those going to help American people, or is it going to help the data centers? Is it going to help the data centers that are going to suck all the energy and potentially pollute the land around people's homes? These are questions that have to be asked, and I don't know the answer. I'm getting a lot of complaints online about data centers. So, is this new energy source for the people or for the data centers? This is the risk you run when you have a country that doesn't own the means of production and private companies can come and take up land and do whatever they want with that land. That's the risk you run. This chart again, what do I say? Workers, wages, labor. Biden new yearly mortgage costs increase and Trump new yearly mortgage costs decrease. So the cost of homes coming down. Look, that's going to be big, but the cost of money has to come down also. And I know he did make one huge announcement tonight that went under the radar probably. And that is, he said he will be announcing a new head of the Federal Reserve. So he worked out something that Jerome Powell is going to leave and he's going to bring in someone that he's going to put in. So that's a huge announcement. If he's going to get somebody in that he wants, you can expect 100%. You could take this to the bank right now. If you're Russia, if you're China, if you're Europe, whoever's listening. If President Trump gets a guy into the Federal Reserve, man or woman, that he absolutely handpicks, there will be dramatic rate cuts. The cost of money will go down. But the prime rate doesn't go to the person who even has a good credit score and wants to buy a house. The prime rate doesn't go to that person. So even if you lower rates, money is still going to cost a decent amount. Home prices are still high. There's other factors going into the cost of homes. You got to see a reduction in the cost of money, a reduction in labor costs, a reduction in building costs, a reduction or an increase in supply. You need all of these things to offset the private real estate sector that is overly financialized to the hilt. Unlike what you have in some other countries, like the country whose chat I was just in on CGTN. So these are things that are just murdering the American real estate market for the average American. And by the way, like I said, look, $2,961, whatever, or whatever that number actually represents, because I can't see if there's any kind of addendum in the bottom. But the decrease is nominal. Houses are still out of control. Price is still out of control. I'm not saying it's all his fault. Some of it's his fault, but some of it isn't. But regardless, it's the system. It's the system. But why is he bringing this up? Because this was a pitch that he is trying to convince the people that own the West that he can calm the storm, and he's trying to convince the people in the West that he's doing a good job. The shareholders, maybe the American people are the shareholders, kind of, not the board of directors. And he is the CEO pitching to them that he can take care of business for them. And whether he will accomplish this or not, look, we're 10 months into his presidency. So there's a lot of time left, but a lot has happened. And I can tell you right now that the average American is not happy with the idea of going to war with Venezuela, and the oil that you steal from Venezuela, is that really going to lower your electricity bill? Because if you think about it, the average American being reliant on a small sector of oil companies that control that higher percentage of oil reserves just means they have a monopoly. And it means that they can price fix and they can coordinate to make sure the price of oil goes up and that they can charge more. Their production costs may not go up, okay, but they will absolutely not lower your bill just because they have access to more stuff. Does that sound very capitalist to you? that if somebody has a monopoly that they'll lower the cost? No, they lower the cost to kill off competition. But once they have a monopoly, the price goes up. This isn't China. This isn't Russia. Okay? The United States, when a business has control of a market, they milk the market dry. Now, he's not going to mention that in this speech, as he did not, but he did talk about new energy generation, and he talked about price of gasoline, and then here, like I said earlier, total native-born employment level. So you see what he's trying to say? I'm deporting people and replacing them with Americans, workers, wages, labor. That was the theme tonight. The question is, did it hit home? Is it going to work? And will people be upset in 2 months after something happens or doesn't happen in the Caribbean? So we'll see. I'm sure we'll have more on this later. For more information, please feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me on YouTube, comment, subscribe, like the video, comment, find me on X at Talking Marks and Markets. And I will be changing the name of this channel back to the same once YouTube allows me to. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Love to connect. And have a great evening, everybody. Be safe.